Why do 71% of white people who regularly attend church still support Donald Trump?
Trump is the new Adolf.
Right off the bat, I want to say I'm not making this episode to attack anyone out there's religion. This episode is specifically about fundamentalists, especially evangelicals, who claim to be so pious, so religious, and they still support Donald Trump. Before we get into this, I should talk about where my relationship with organized religion started. I was sent to Catholic school for preschool to second grade. I could only make it to second grade, and then I had to get out of there. The reason I got in trouble so much in Catholic school during this time period was there was one question that I constantly asked, and it would just piss the nuns off. They would get so mad at me. But I would always ask, who made God? And I was always given this answer, no one made God. God just is. Well, after second grade and asking this question about 100 times, I finally told my grandma, I said, hey, I think this Catholic school is bullshit. And she's like, that's fine. We'll take you out of it. It'll be cheaper anyway. Send you to public school. The thing about public school in Utah is you're still in a religious school. It's just Mormons now. Now that was the Catholic Church. That was the Catholic school of like the early 90s, right? Which I've been reintroduced to Catholicism courtesy of my wife's family. And it seems that the Catholics have upped it a bit. Maybe to keep up with the other wacky religions or cults out there. For instance, I learned the Catholic Church has prayer warriors. They basically are professional prayers. And they sit there and they pray for like 2.5 hours straight. This is a real thing. They just pray for 2.5 hours that stuff happens. I mean, they could go outside and make it happen. You know, do a little Jesus in the streets. But no, they sit and pray for 2.5 hours with professional prayers. 8 in 10 evangelicals said they'd vote for Trump even after 2020. All my Catholic in-laws voted for Trump. And if you want to know how pious they are, just ask them. They'll be happy to tell you. A Mormon lady I went to school with back in Utah, she spent a full month getting Obama's message to the students. Back then, Obama was just going to do a message saying like, stay in school. Pretty vanilla stuff. She spent a month making sure that he wasn't shown on any TVs in Utah. And then in 2020, her Facebook was filled with only pictures of her dressing her kids up in MAGA gear. Hundreds of pictures. Grooming them into this political, whatever you want to call it, this cult of personality. Obama was a lot more center than I thought he was going to be. There's no denying that. But there's also no denying that Obama's a family man. He doesn't have any rape cases against him. He didn't pay off any porn stars. He didn't have a child separation policy. In fact, the 48 hours they needed to turn around cases, that was during the Obama era. That's what Trump got rid of. So kids could be held indefinitely while their parents were shipped God knows where. I mean, Obama gave a cheaper healthcare option. You know, a single payer would have been nice. Thanks, who was it? Joe Lieberman, I think it was. But in my mind, these are all pious things. These are all things that a religious person should get behind, a follower of Jesus Christ. But what the do I know? Because here's the thing. Obama was black. I don't know if you heard. And in the Mormon faith, even though in the 1970s they said, oh, just kidding. In the Mormon faith, they believe black people are the sinners of the world. They're burned for their sins. I don't want to go into their whole thing. But this is part of the ideology. So just the color of Obama's skin already made him a sinner to this, this Mormon Karen. Mormons hold whiteness to be more of a virtue, to count more than the character of an individual. And it's the same thing with white evangelicals. In fact, an overwhelming majority of white evangelicals think that police violence is made up. It's not a real thing. It's not a problem. And it's not a problem because of who the police are going after. And on top of that, white evangelicals, a cornerstone of their faith is the persecution complex, right? that they're always being persecuted for their beliefs. But a cop abusing his power over someone powerless because of their skin color, that doesn't qualify as persecution. And it's in these observations where I think we can start to see how religious fundamentalism translates so easily into the language of MAGA. As I've talked about a ton of times on this channel, the Republican Party is a Frankenstein of fringe groups, radical groups, and they're all stitched together to form a coalition, to form a base. And one of the biggest parts of that stitching now are the Christo-fascists. First off, the Bible doesn't say anything about abortion anywhere in the Bible. And they say that life begins when you take your first breath. When LBJ passed the Civil Rights Act, he flipped the South. All the Dixiecrats became Republicans. In turn, the Republican Party needed a way to fire up these white evangelicals. And by the mid-1970s, the Republican Party had leaned completely into this movement to control women's health care, to control women's bodies. I mean, if you've ever talked to an evangelical, they really think that they know everything. They really do. I mean, sometimes on here, I pretend I know everything, but I don't. I don't know everything. But they honestly believe they have it all figured out. And that leads them to believe that their idea of society, their social order, with race as a hierarchy, you can't really deny it when it comes to the evangelicals. That social order needs to be maintained. And people need to be controlled within the confines of what they believe as individuals. And from voting against school lunches to Sarah Huckabee sending 8-year-olds to work in chemical factories, to the way the Republican Party has churned out 18-year-olds for their wars. They don't actually care what happens once the baby's out. I doubt they even care when the baby's in. It's all about control. It's all about controlling a woman's body. And it's about keeping women in their place. You know, white evangelicals, if you don't wait till marriage, they think you're a slut for having sex. As someone who grew up in Utah, Mormonism is the exact same thing. It's just a different flavor. It's the pistachio of evangelicalism. The pistachio with a little Scientology, like a little recent history pizzazz. So with black people gaining more rights, women having more control of their bodies, and a younger generation leaving these evangelicals, what did they do next to try to seize power? They became a large voting sect within the Republican Party. And a lot of them would do just this single issue, this abortion issue. Single issue voters. And in the late 70s, you can kind of see the precursors to what Reagan would be. Reagan kind of embodied that blurriness between, a president and authoritarian. Reagan did whatever he wanted, right? Iran-Contra, selling drugs. He kind of cut Congress and even the courts at the time out of all of it. It was the authoritarian approach that we see with today's Republican Party. I mean, how often do Republicans talk about the Senate or Congress anymore? It's all about the presidency, right? It's all about one person. It's a cult of personality. And propping up that cult of personality are these white, fundamentalist, religious voters who will support authoritarianism as long as authoritarianism supports them. So now they take their time-honored tradition of being persecuted. But instead of being persecuted in their churches for their beliefs, now they've attached themselves to a political party. So now they say they're being persecuted for their ideological beliefs. They're being persecuted because of their politics. The Republican Party since, Reagan, probably before then, has been nothing but dog whistles. But in 2016, these white evangelicals, they finally got their guy. They finally got the guy who would speak to them and feed their persecution complex, both politically, religiously, and wherever else you catch them. It's a cornerstone of the Republican Party. It's a fetish, a persecution fetish almost. And it was right out the gate, right? Trump went right after. Brown people are coming in. They're destroying this country. They're ruining this country. Muslims are coming in. Remember the Muslim ban? White evangelicals are the only major religion that believe Islam is evil. They believe it's an evil religion. And of course, this moved on to giving forced births. And in their mind, or at least outwardly how they express themselves, is they believe Democrats are evil. The Democratic Party is evil. So everything they do, backing Trump, backing these batshit policies, it's all fine because Democrats are the devil. I mean, if you're going to believe Joseph Smith read magic plates so that he could bang 20 underage wives, if you're going to believe that God and Jesus are going to come down and take you with them while the rest of us burn, if you're going to believe that your skin color somehow makes you more pious, and it's not too much of a stretch for these people to believe in an imperfect savior. And it's not just me pulling this out of my ass. Barry Goldwater, the biggest Republican in like the 60s and 70s, here's what he had to say. Mark my word, if and when these preachers get control of the Republican Party, and they're sure trying to do so, it's going to be a terrible damn problem. Frankly, these people frighten me. Politics and governing demand compromise. Compromise. But these Christians believe they act in the name of God, so they can't and won't compromise. I know, I've tried to deal with them. And understanding they were this way in the 70s, and they're still this way today, you understand why they start to fit in with some of the Frankenstein parts of the Republican Nationalist Party. Just think of the white nationalists that make up a significant portion of the GOP. They also believe that their skin color makes them pious. They believe that they are so right and will not compromise with anything. I mean, how long did it take him to get a Speaker of the House? Because what? Because the Congress sometimes takes compromising with Democrats? They won't compromise with anything because they believe they are right. And just like the evangelicals, they think they're victims, right? They think they're victims who need an authoritarian to set things straight, to set things right, to make their worldview not the worldview of the majority of the people in this country, but their very narrow worldview a reality. Persecuted because of who they are. Indeed, the evangelical and the Proud Boy, they both are the victims and the aggressors. And that is one of the major defining characteristics of fascism. That may trigger you, that may make you mad that I'm using that word, but that's how fascism works at its core.
Immunity
let's just
from
watch
prosecution, this. Even for things that cross the line, including, as his lawyers argued in court recently, for killing political rivals. This is what he said at a rally in New Hampshire last night about that.
You're going to have to give the president, you're going to have to allow a president, any president,
power
to have immunity so that president can act and do what he feels and what his group of advisors feel is the absolute right thing. Otherwise, you're going to have presidents that are totally impotent, and we've had enough of them already. So having immunity
all you
is
got to
so
do is listen to
these
people.
I hope the Supreme Court has the courage to do that.
So
do you
watch
agree,
this
should the president have total immunity even for things that cross the line?
Of course not. The amazing thing about that clip is he was dead serious. He wasn't even making one of his ridiculous jokes. He was dead serious about that.
Yeah.
That should get everybody. I don't care what political party you're from, whether you're an extreme conservative or socialist liberal.
You do care,
everybody
though.
should be concerned with that type of mentality going into the White House.
And yet you are saying if he is the nominee, that you are going to support him. How can you say that you'll support him?
At the end of the day, I think most Republicans are going to get behind the Republican nominee. I'm hoping that it's obviously Nikki Haley. This is how bad Joe Biden is. 6 months ago, Trump couldn't beat Biden. This is how bad Joe Biden is. Inflation
and it comes back to Joe Biden.
Families across this country.
Hold on. This is like when the abusive husband says, "Why do you make me hit you? Why do you make me hit you? Why is Joe Biden making us vote for this fascist? Give me a f***ing break."
we're weak on the international stage. We haven't secured our border. Even Democrats have agreed that he's been completely incompetent and not on the ball there, so to say. So this is where we've come, where Joe Biden is so bad that even folks would get behind Donald Trump.
And yet you're saying that the comments by Donald Trump, everyone should be worried about that. You have said earlier that Trump's rhetoric and actions contributed to the January 6th insurrection. How can you support someone who you believe contributed to the insurrection?
We're here in New Hampshire in the first nation primary. No one's really thinking about the general election right now. If you want to beat Donald Trump,
everyone's thinking of the general election.
Don't sit on your couch. Don't wait for it to happen. Don't
Everyone's
wait for some
thinking of the general
external factor or court case to take over. You got to get out and vote. Whether you're undeclared Republican, getting that vote out is how you beat it. That's democracy.
But despite all of these comments, despite his comments on immunity, despite what you said about the insurrection, you would still vote for Donald Trump in a general election against
according
Joe
to
Biden?
the polls, most of America would. This is
how pathetic can you be? It's almost like a comedy. And it'd probably be funny if 35% of the country didn't think this way. I mean, this chud goes on about how terrible Donald Trump is, how what he's doing is illegal, how he's not joking anymore. And then at the end, the lady says, well, will you still vote for him? Will you still vote for this guy who's up there talking about controlling the courts, authoritarianism, who you just said is saying illegal shit? Will you still vote for him? Well, yeah, if he's the nominee. And what does that remind me of? What does that take me back to? Catholic school. Who made God? He just is. Republican Party. Why is Trump your leader? He just is. Worshipping of politicians never ends well for that country, especially if they're a democratic republic like us.
By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything, deleted and destroyed all of it because of lots of things. Like Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people, soldiers, National Guard, so whatever they want. They turned it down. They don't want to talk about that.
He said Nikki Haley 3 times.
That isn't a mix-up. The reality is Nikki Haley.
She wasn't speaker.
Nikki Haley is relying on Democrats, just like Nancy Pelosi, to try to have a desperate showing in New Hampshire.
But he was talking about January 6th.
President Trump has not lost a step. He is a stronger candidate, stronger than he is today, than he was in 2016 and he was in 2020. Compare that to Joe Biden's weakness.
In one breath, they will go from Trump saying Nikki Haley for Nancy Pelosi. He said it over and over. That clip didn't get it, but he said it like 5-6 times. He said Nikki Haley was there on January 6th and she wouldn't release the National Guard. Joe Biden has dementia. He doesn't know where he's at. But when Trump does this, he's being sarcastic, right? Did he look sarcastic to you? This is to say that others, and myself included, spent way too much time pointing out the hypocrisy of the religious people supporting Donald Trump. The hypocrisy of the churches. The hypocrisy of the self-appointed pious people. Instead, we should have been talking about how Trump was the perfect segue, the perfect on-ramp for these groups, these radical, religious, Christo-fascist groups, to catapult themselves onto the national stage. If you like this channel, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, you can now join if you want to support the channel and get special emojis, a special chat during the lives, I think. I got to look into it. I've only added 1 tier. I don't have the other tiers ready to go yet. But you can support the channel that way. And just tell your friends. Thanks for being here. If you don't like the video, give it a thumbs down. Write in the comments. Write in the comments how I live in the basement of my parents' house. Something like that. It hurts. It hurts when you write that. So know if you write that, you're stinging me. You're hurting me. The Chud Report.
How good did Elise Stepanek do?